The hype for this game was absolutely fucking crazy. A great first game that showcased how Insomniac truly understood the characters and made this world their own. To have some of the most iconic stories slash characters adapted in the sequel, what could possibly go wrong? This was just set up to be absolutely peak.
Venom's only 12 inches.
Now, it's already the 4th highest selling game of the year, I believe, which is no surprise really, of course, it was going to do well. But how good actually is it? I've finished the story now, and I'm like 83% through the entire game. Spider-Man 2 does what every other form of Spider-Man media seems to be scared to do, and actually progresses these characters. They aren't trapped in one period, they are growing, and as they grow they encounter different problems that come with their age, and that obviously manifests and is represented in a very Spider-Man way. And I mean, let me just stop here and say yes, this game is fucking great. Gameplay wise, I'm not the one that could talk to you about this, because I've not got the first clue about making games, so take all of this with a grain of salt. I'm just speaking from my experience of what it's like as someone who enjoys playing games, playing the game, and that's about as far as I can take it. Most of this video will be me talking about the story, so yeah. But I think it kept everything that worked from the first game, but switched up things appropriately too. We don't have the web gadget wheel, which was fun in the first game, but I think the changes work for this game specifically. Obviously Miles has his Venom powers and Pete has the mechanical arms as well as eventually the black suit, and I've seen some people complain, and I can fall either way on it. Like for stealth missions I missed the gadget wheel, but also the new power set is just so much more fun. Like, I think for sure there's less ways you can use them, but it didn't really bother me. But obviously the game nails the swinging, and it really does make you feel like Spider-Man. I could spend all day just swinging throughout the city, same as how I could have just driven around Los Santos for hours on end. The game looks great, especially while you're actually playing it. However, maybe it doesn't look as good as some other PS5 games, especially during cutscenes, but I can forgive it due to how well it plays and how good it is at pretty much everything else. And I'm not saying it looks bad either, I'm just saying there are other PS5 games that have kind of set the standard a bit higher that this doesn't always reach. The opening is genuinely phenomenal. Holy shit, that Sandman fight is wild. What a set piece. If anything can be described as epic, it's this opening. Miles getting thrown across the city and the game not cutting, and working together, building up to beat this enraged Sandman for reasons that we don't yet know. And Jesus, it's just the opening, guys. Chill, please. We've got so much more game left to go. It's so good that I think some of the boss fights later on feel a bit lackluster, if I'm honest. Not bad, but it doesn't reach that same scale that this first battle does. And I love a lot of the later boss fights, but this opening sets such a high standard that there's no way the entire game can really live up to it. Straight after this intro, we see the issues of being Spider-Man for Peter and Miles, particularly Peter. He loses his job as a teacher. Miles can kind of get away with it because he's just a student skipping class, but Peter can't leave a class of kids alone in the middle of a city fucking crisis. Such a perfect opening for the game, Peter struggling as much as ever to be Peter and Spider-Man, whereas Miles is loving being Spider-Man more than Miles. Having two Spider-Men allows to explore so much great character work. Peter has been where Miles is, and with the return of Harry, is pining for those memories of when they were Miles' age. But Miles doesn't really see this, and he thinks it's okay to kind of just be Spider-Man. But Peter knows that he'll regret that, and Peter knows that Miles needs to be Miles as well as Spider-Man. Throughout the game, we'll see Miles constantly choosing to be Spider-Man over finishing a college application or doing something family related or hanging out with friends. At times, it's just an escape. When he's saving the world, becoming an adult is pretty irrelevant. And I mean, having to take those steps as you grow up and gain more responsibility, it feels like you're up against a world-ending threat every day. I feel like I'm up against a world-ending threat when I go to buy a pack of cider from the shop, so I understand. But out of sight, out of mind for Miles, essentially. But this is something that, again, Peter has been through and done, and is now desperate for those days back because he's lost so much time with Harry being ill, and now Harry's finally back. Of course he wants those younger years to return. And that leads me into Harry Osborn's character. I didn't love it.
What?
This might be a surprise saying that, but I have no issue with Harry being Venom. With stuff like this, I'm not really bothered about big changes from source material, because as long as it's not disrespectful to that original material, because I think it's up to each creative individual to take things in their own way and try unique stuff. And sometimes changes work, sometimes they don't. And also with Venom, I never felt like Eddie and Venom are like the duo, but maybe that's because I'm not a big comic reader. There's probably a lot more to it. Don't crucify me, please. But anyway, in this case, I just don't think Harry was worked amazingly into the game. Him and his relationships with everyone just didn't feel totally cooked through. So when we get to the climax, it doesn't hit as strongly in an emotional sense as the first game did. Now that's not saying it's bad at all. I loved the climax. It was great, but it just wasn't perfect. And I don't think the character's inclusion was done as well as it could have been. Somehow, I feel like it runs into a similar problem as the film that also included Sandman and Venom, in that certain aspects feel slightly undercooked, in particular Harry Osborn's Venom.
You're not, Harry. We are.
This is exactly what I've been waiting for.
It just feels like it happens way too quickly. Maybe that's a case of the game being too short, I'm not really sure. But it's almost like too many plots are kind of fighting for the spotlight, and Harry's ends up falling behind a little bit. Like the turnaround for him to be hating Peter doesn't feel as earned as the game itself wants. There's like one scene where Harry sees his dad talking to Pete, calling him like a second son, and that's never elaborated on. A major problem is that it all takes place only over a few days, and I think if it took over a few weeks or even a little bit more, it would have allowed for the entire symbiote plotline to feel more consequential in a way. I really like pretty much all of what they do, believe me, but I just feel like it falls slightly short with the emotional effects that it leaves us with, and the only reason I even take a big notice of that is because the first game nailed it. The first game had such a great emotional weight to it, and I think by the end, this sequel doesn't totally match up in that regard.
I see a man. I sense a beast.
Kraven is a badass. Get this Sony Cinematic Universe shit out of my way. This is my guy, and he's a fucking... Shit is just way too good. Kraven is a fucking menace, dude. He feels like a true threat, and I love pretty much everything they do with him in this game. So desperate to not let his cancer kill him, that he wants his life to be taken by a true equal to himself, seeking out individuals who could potentially be that equal, but with most of them, they're not. And he kills multiple of Spider-Man's rogues gallery. Even killing Spider-Man until the symbiote brings him back, and that's how Peter gets the symbiote. I love how Kraven brings out the worst in Peter with the symbiote and really antagonizes him, trying to push him further and further to a point where Peter would break his own rule and do something that he can never forgive himself for. Because with the black suit, killing Kraven is not really that out of the question for Peter. The black suit makes Peter a menace himself. Yuri Lowenthal, or should I say, Bully Lowenthal.
Why don't you pop some more pills and say what you really feel?
Hey!
I made you! You owe me! Just a dying old man looking for a way out! No wonder your family left you!
But Black Suit Peter becomes more monstrous as the story goes on, and I like that. It's so good, it feels alien. It feels like a creature has attached itself and is manipulating this character. The sequence where you play as MJ and have to run from Peter is incredible. Straight out of a horror game, and I loved it. I love how the suit transforms into more of an alien as the story goes on. Obviously, eventually, Miles is able to get through to Peter, and you get to rip that symbiote off. I loved it. It wasn't the hardest boss fight, but I would say it was maybe my favourite in a sense of the story. And as cliche as it is to say, you felt every second of it. A bit later on, as Miles, we journey into Peter's mind with Mr. Negative to prevent the symbiote from taking over once again. And we see all the pain that he has inside, all that weight weighing on him that the symbiote has latched itself onto. It's so fun to play, it's so emotionally resonating, and it's so well told, and that all leads to Peter becoming Anti-Venom. I don't know shit about Anti-Venom from the comics, so this is kind of my first exposure to it, and I thought it worked really well. The symbiote obviously gets back to Harry, and it turns him into Venom. What a moment that is, and what a sequence that ensues, where we get to play as Venom. What the fuck? I did not see that coming. I remember seeing stuff now before the game that kind of hinted at Venom being playable at one point, but I'd totally forgotten when I was playing the game, so that was a crazy surprise and one of the most fun missions. It's a dream, just hammering everyone in sight as this monstrous beast. So fun. That leads to the Kraven fight, where we continue to play as Venom. Once again, another great boss battle, ending in such a powerful way, where we win the battle. It is as brutal as it needs to be, and we see how the symbiote manipulates Harry into believing he can heal the world using the memory of his mother who passed. I think all of this is great, whilst I do think the Harry stuff falls short in some aspects. And I really do feel like where the game falls short is because of the time span that the story happens with it. It feels like nothing has the time to properly sit with us, as much as I felt like the first game found that balance, like that ending with May and the Doc Ock final battle. It just had an extra punch that this game couldn't seem to land for me. Because so much happens in this game, and it's over the course of a few nights, no more than a week. Kraven showing up, Peter getting the symbiote, going down a dark path, and Harry becoming Venom, and all of these different things, as well as all the side stuff. Like, it is a bit mental. But mentioning the side stuff, that's some of the best stuff in the game. I mean, that's where we see how much Insomniac understands Spider-Man. There are some great missions. The Howard mission is heartbreaking. And there's another mission where you just sit with someone's granddad as they wait for their granddaughter to catch up to them. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And those little moments that remind me of scenes like in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, where he helps the kid who's being bullied. That is phenomenal. And the fact that you have this world-ending stuff happening, but never do you lose sight of that core, is so good. We've got Sandman's crystals, which I thought were really fun. The spider bots are really fun to collect, and I don't know what happens when you've got them all, but I can't wait to find out. Wraith, and introducing
Carnage.
Hello, can't wait for that in the sequel. Now, I'm gonna take a minute to talk about Miles, because I've spoken a bit about how some of the story with Harry doesn't work, and it is a Peter-centric game, so Miles is kind of secondary. He's still, like, the lead protagonist, but like I say, it is a Peter-centric story. And I genuinely think Miles' character arc and story might be better. The only issue with Miles' stuff is that fucking suit at the end of the game. What were they thinking? You gotta make me play against fucking Venom in an Adidas tracksuit.
What the fuck are you wearing?
It's time for a Miles Morales original, you know? One of one.
That shit's ass, bro.
Miles is clearly consumed with rage whenever he even thinks about his dad and Mr. Negative. We find out pretty early on about this and how Miles almost wants to let Mr. Negative die if he can. He thinks that would be justice for his dad and revenge. And then this all kind of builds, and we see all the stuff about Miles being more Spider-Man and worrying about Peter leaving him as well, and not being able to live up to Peter. And we get so much great stuff as the story goes on. And we reach this fight between Miles and Mr. Negative. And we think Miles is about to put him down. And whilst I never thought Miles was actually going to kill him, and he grabs Mr. Negative and he just whispers, "Find Spider-Man." And that was a goosebumps moment. It was so good. Both Spider-Men in this game have to learn to accept that they can't do this alone. But asking for each other's help is such a scary and alien concept, but it's the only way to resolve the problems that arise in this game. They can't do it alone. This is some of the most fun I've had playing a game. Full stop, I think. I still am playing it. I want to try and 100% it, but my issue is I'm just not good at games. As much as I think there's a lot crammed into a short space of time, its gameplay is so fun, and the story is overall incredibly well told and executed, and emotionally resonates with me pretty strongly. And this is undoubtedly, in my opinion, an improvement on the first game, as well as just a top tier Spider-Man project.